This presenter for today's meeting is Xavier Fernandes, Analytics Director at Metapraxis from London, United Kingdom. So the company is a highly regarded consultancy, but also a technology company as well, and company already experimenting with artificial intelligence and machine learning for a number of FP&A projects. Xavier, you're welcome. And again, I would like to ask your permission to manage your slides, if you don't mind.
Please do, Larissa. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Please do stop me at any time if I'm indistinct or speaking too fast. Larissa, I'll just start, or for the group, I'll just start with 30 seconds on my background, just so you know who you're, a little bit more about me. So straight out of university, I'm afraid I don't have a slide for this, but straight out of university, I joined a defense company in the UK. I basically designed and coded software to hunt enemy submarines, which was very exciting. I moved to a less dangerous career with Anderson Consulting, where I spent maybe about half my career. They are now, of course, Accenture, and I was a technology consultant with Anderson's. I moved to EY, to their M&A team, and spent 5 years there doing due diligence and post-merger integration, again with a technology focus. And now, as Larissa said, I'm Analytics Director at Metapraxis. So I've got 5 slides to take us through, and Larissa's kind of given an introduction around the topic, but just picking up on Asif's kind of final point. Asif talks about the desire to seek out new opportunities to apply machine learning techniques, and that's what I'll be talking about today. How FP&A teams are using AI to drive step changes in business performance. So that's going beyond applying those AI techniques to enhance current analysis, but really to identify how step changes in business performance can be pushed through. The context. What's the context for FP&A teams? Well, FP&A teams are, of course, asked to analyze and explain business performance. That's a key part of the role. And that's never more so the case than when performance isn't going so well. That's when there's a lot more requests and a lot more urgency to explain performance. Possibly AI techniques could be used to help explain that performance. But we get to a real challenge in terms of getting the most out of machine learning algorithms in terms of what they can deliver if we use the typical data sets that FP&A teams get. Let me bring that to life on the image here. So the image represents what may happen to business data before an FP&A team gets their hands on it. So at the bottom of that picture, we've got the business functions in blue. They might be entering data into an ERP system. That data may be sliced, diced, consolidated, or have business structures imposed on it. And then there may be some interfaces to pull subsets of that data into BI and MI systems. And even from there might be extracts then run, more filters applied, and that will generate data sets and reports used by the FP&A team. So this is a reasonably typical but simplified view of what may happen for many FP&A teams. And so the data that they get may be several steps removed from the business, and may have had various constructs, business hierarchies, product hierarchies applied to it. And running machine learning algorithms directly over that data may not give you that much insight in terms of what's happening at the business insight. At the sharp end of the business. Let me just step back and draw an analogy to this. So let's say I was trying to create a facial recognition algorithm. So completely different use case, but a facial recognition algorithm. And I have my sets of training data, as if kind of talk through gathering training data. So my training data might be pictures of people, harvested off wherever, Facebook. But if some of that data, well, a lot of it was kind of put through random Instagram filters, and you had cartoon noses added or ears or whatever to those images. Well, I shouldn't expect my machine learned algorithm out of that to give me to be actually that good at recognizing normal human faces. And that might be a problem that we face as FP&A teams. If the data has gone through various filters, processes driven by the IT systems, driven by changing hierarchies within the business, machine learning algorithms can come a little bit unstuck. So it's great to hear actually from Azza. He went out and he was gathering more operational level data. And I'm going to talk through a couple of examples now where FP&A teams have been faced with, so their challenge, which we'll go through, they've been faced with ongoing disappointing business performance. Strictly speaking, it's not their job to address that, but they've wanted to do something about that. Sorry, Larissa, I'll just come to that in a second. I will hurry up. So they've realized AI won't help them with their current data sets. They've sourced operational data, and they've used machine learning algorithms to run over that data and then drive step changes in business performance. So on the slide that's now on the screen, I'll just talk through this first use case. We've got two slides on this. So the industry that we're looking at here, the business provides financial data via subscriptions to large organizations. They also provide data analytics, and they provide financial trading apps. The core part of the business is around those data subscriptions. That brings in a significant amount of their revenue. And it's the context is just extremely volatile, those subscription sales. There's only so much that the sales teams can do about it. The impact of those volatile subscription sales have been wide or inaccurate variations in sales predictions. At least that volatility has been held up as being the reason why we couldn't get, or the customer couldn't get, more accurate, stable sales predictions. To give you a sense of how much those predictions could vary, they could vary as much as plus or minus 50%, just 1 month out to the eventual actuals. So as if I mentioned being out about 5%, but in this business it was out plus or minus 50%. And so you can imagine the challenge for that FP&A team, for that finance team, predicting cash flow. I mean, it was up and down every single month. And we're having these challenges a month out, let alone 3 months or 6 months out. So there was that general challenge with being able to forecast business performance against plan across the year. That was the situation that that particular company was facing. So what did they do about it? So if we go on to the next slide, well, the approach they took will be quite familiar to those of you who are kind of enmeshed in ML programs today. At least the first few steps should be familiar. They sourced historical data. They got detailed monthly sales predictions from the various sales teams around the world. These sales predictions, typically it was probability against each opportunity. And they also sourced the financial actuals, which is a little bit easier for them to get, but they had to go further afield to get the detailed sales predictions. Having got that data, they modeled that information using linear regression, machine learned linear regression, to generate a model of predictions to financial outcomes. So far, a pretty par for the course for a machine learning approach. They analyzed those first results. The results were generally good, but they did identify some areas for improvement. And so they applied further business context in those particular areas. So, for example, areas of particular known volatility, that might be a subsection of geography and product. For example, it might be, for example, a particularly new product out on the market, or a smaller geography in terms of revenue. There could be areas of recent structural change. So there might have been changes in the lines of business behind those products. So additional context was applied to the machine learned algorithm. Sometimes those were manual changes to the weights. I just want to highlight that it wasn't just all plain sailing of being able to take the results directly out of the machine learning algorithm. Out of that process, the model was iterated to get within predictions which were within acceptable tolerances. So following the good approach of having a set of target tolerances before we start doing the machine learning. If I think through or kind of highlight what were the outcomes for this company, well, the initial outcome was the finance team were very happy. The accuracy was now within plus or minus 10%. And again, as if I realized that 5% was not good enough for your team. For this company, having gone from plus or minus 50% a month out to plus or minus 10% was a massive improvement, and definitely something that was really valuable for them, given that context of extremely volatile subscription sales. The sales teams, though, were untrusting, and they were nervous about this. If I sum up their reaction, it was, how can you predict our performance better than our predictions? They were not very happy that their own predictions were being put to one side by the finance team, who was phoning them up saying, we don't believe your prediction, here's our prediction. That was about 2 years ago. I won't go through the ins and outs in between, but today the sales function is bought into this process, into this algorithmic forecasting. They've seen the evidence with their own eyes that this gives them better forecasts. And they themselves are actually pushing for expanded usage. The usage is being expanded, got deeper granularity, and it's being used to advise individual sales managers as well as the higher level sales teams. They use this within months. So within the first week of a month, they can see, are they already tracking on for the end of month target, let alone their kind of quarterly target as well. The sales and finance functions were really pleased that the CEO mentioned the work they've been doing when he was speaking at a seminar at Davos, at the last session of Davos. So they're really happy with that. Larissa, I'm aware of time, so I'll try to speed up a little bit. Additional benefits, the algorithm did spot that different teams around the world were doing things in different ways. Some teams were more cautious, some were, a bit more pessimistic, some were more optimistic in terms of how they rated opportunities. That led to changes in processes, because we could highlight that through the algorithm. And the algorithm actually had to relearn. When people started to change their ways of scoring opportunities, the algorithm had a little bump for a month or two, but then learned as people changed their approach and got back on course. That's the reality of using these algorithms if you are able to drive change in how the business actually operates. I'm going to quickly move on to the next slide, conscious of time. This example is for a consumer credit firm. And this particular firm focused in on point-of-sale loans for goods and services. These loans are, in effect, provided via retailers. So people going into a shop, maybe to buy furniture or electronic equipment, can sign up for interest-free credit or credit with some interest rate applied to it. For this particular company, their business situation, they were partway through an ambitious expansion plan, and they were hit by higher than expected losses. So they still had, great plans to expand the capital applied to the loan book, but they were a bit concerned about where the losses were trending. For the finance team, the information they got from elsewhere within the business, well, it was taking 6 months or so to establish loss patterns from each monthly vintage of loans that had been sold. That's a long time for the finance team to have to wait to get insight. But probably worst of all, even that forecast after 6 months was not at a granular level. It was an overall loan book level. So you couldn't take meaningful action from that forecast. You couldn't have conversations internally and externally being with those channel partners, with the retailers, to say, look, we've got to price our loans differently. We've got to change our range of customers, what risk we take on board, or we need to change the kind of size of loans that we're happy to offer for particular types of customers, for particular types of goods or services bought. So that was the challenge that they were facing. I'll rattle on to the next slide. Hopefully that set the picture. So what did the finance team do? What did the FP&A team do? Driven pretty much by the CFO's intuition. And his intuition was there must be a way to better understand, to better control the losses if we were able to analyze the outcomes of these loans back down to loan level data. So it's very much focused on what's known as post-origination, after the whole application process, after you've actually sold the loan. And just to give a bit more context around this, consumer credit firms spend a lot of time and effort up front in the application process. Use companies such as Experian, Xavier, etc. I'm sure you're familiar with them. Many companies spend less effort post-origination. There's a belief that you've pretty much locked in losses. However, what we've been able to show is there's a lot of value within that data to actually help forecast outcomes many years into the future. So the finance team took historical actual payment data. They modeled that data using transition matrices. You may be familiar with transition matrices, a very common technique for analyzing how customer status will change from one period to another. But if you only use transition matrices, well, their forecasts tend to deviate a little bit after just running through for a few periods, trying to predict a few periods hence. And what this customer needed to do was actually predict month on month for several years ahead, because these loans might be for 3 years, 5 years, or thereabouts. So what was added on top of this was machine-learned linear regression modeling on top of these transition matrices to forecast by loan the status by month for the remaining term of those loans. The other aspects of this approach, which Xavier has touched upon, was they put a robust software engineering approach around this, so that a monthly process could be stood up that was going to be consistent and give useful forecasts. I am speeding up to go into the outcomes. So lifetime loss predictions across those loans has improved vastly. The customer got better predictions sooner. And probably more importantly, they had granular predictions by retailer. So that helped them give them really good guidance about which retailers were providing them with loans, or were selling out loans that were going to be performant, and which ones were going to be less performant. A great thing about the approach of forecasting loan statuses is that a proper overlay, a proper allocation of costs could be done. The intuition here is that a lower performing, a weaker performing loan, it costs you more. It costs you more in terms of interest expense. It costs you more in terms of customer service expense. And up till this point, the company couldn't do that proper detailed allocation of costs. But by allocating those costs based on the forecast status of the loans, this one's going to turn bad, so therefore it's going to cost us more. Margins, proper margin predictions could be identified, and so that again helps identify should the company stay with a particular retailer, should expand their business with another retailer. So I'm going to pause on that. Thanks, Larissa, and just very quickly summarize. So context, FP&A teams, you are well placed in terms of data analysis skills and in terms of mindset to champion machine learning and AI. Sometimes, though, traditional FP&A data sets can be insufficient to take advantage of the full capabilities of machine learning algorithms to explain, and especially if you want to change business performance. Unfortunately, business functions don't always step up to analyze their own data, and so this is where FP&A teams, when pushed to it, can really step up and drive step changes in business performance. Expect some pushback from the business. We saw that in both of those examples. I didn't touch upon it in the second one, but there was pushback from the business from elsewhere. But if handled well, then it can really drive the wider businesses' appetite for using AI techniques. Sorry for that very rushed ending, but I did want to ensure that there's some time left for questions at the end. Larissa, back to you.
Thank you so much, Xavier, for sharing your experience with us.